Hey everyone, so welcome to this presentation. We're going to be talking about safety. So this is going to be more of a review. This is for more of like the students that are taking my courses as they review for their midterm or their final exam, at least for the safety portions. However, you don't have to be a student in my class in order to get something out of this video. It'll be educational nonetheless. And so let's go ahead and start getting into it. So let's talk about ventilation because we all know that when you're welding, some processes of welding create smoke. They create fumes that, of course, will cloud up in the air that we're breathing. And if we're not careful, this stuff is going to get into our lungs. So, this is why a lot of welders will say the number one step or the number one thing to take into consideration during welding operations or just fabrication in general is ventilation. So the one main question to think about here is how can you work if you can't breathe? So there's a lot of different things to take into consideration with ventilation. One is just making sure that there's a free flow of air in your work area. If you find that smoke is accumulating pretty fast and it's not really going anywhere, make use of any fans that you have in the shop. Make use of any exhaust systems that you have to suck the smoke up out of your immediate work area. Use respirators, and of course, if all else fails, stop, take a break, go get some fresh air, because the last thing anyone wants to happen is for you to pass out for lack of oxygen. Of course, this is going to look bad on the company, and just in general, we want to avoid personal risk or personal injuries. All right, next up. So let's talk about personal protective equipment, otherwise known as PPE. So let's talk about PPE. Well, we want to do the best that we can to minimize the risk of injury to ourselves. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we have the right PPE and we actually need to utilize it. It's one thing to say you have it and not use it, and it's another to say you have it and actually use it on the job. Trust me, I've seen it in my years of experience where people they cut corners, they don't wear elements of their PPE, and they end up getting injured. And it really falls on them because they chose not to protect themselves in the proper way. And then, of course, we also want to remember that we want to replace aspects of our PPE as they get wear and tear. As they break down, we want to make sure that our PPE is doing its job. So once it stops doing its job or stops doing it effectively, we need to go ahead and replace those items. So let's talk about safety glasses first. Obviously, we want to protect our eyes, right? If we can't see, we can't do our job. And of course, any injury to our eyes is going to be pretty painful. It's happened to me before. I'll save that story for later. But you can see that there are many different types of safety glasses that you can wear. There's no real correct or right choice when it comes to safety glasses. You want to just make sure that, of course, they're impact rated and that they're going to cover your vision from the sides, or they're going to protect your eyes from the sides. So you can see that all of these safety glasses, they kind of have a wraparound feature to where they're not just protecting the front of your eyes, but also the sides of your eyes. And down in this lower right hand corner, these are prescription glasses. So you can get away with using safety glasses, but only if you have side shields that can clip on. Otherwise, if you don't have these side shields, debris is free to kind of, fly in behind your glasses and enter your eye. And that's something that we want to avoid. And then also, things like this are just not going to cut it. All right, having makeshift items for safety glasses, it's just not going to work. So we've got one picture of a guy, using a plastic bag to cover his face while he's grinding. If any shards of metal were to fly up at his face, this bag isn't really going to protect a whole lot. We got someone here in the middle who's just closing their eyes. And that definitely is not going to work. Like, sure, you'll protect your eyes from the light that's being emitted from the weld, but you're not going to protect your face or your skin from any any particulate matter, any kind of debris or anything like that. And then the same goes for this person on the right who's chosen to take a candy bag and turn it into a face shield. So these all actually provide you with little to no protection, and you just want to avoid it. So now let's move on to our hearing protection. So of course we want to protect our hearing. It's something that once it's damaged, you can never get it back. So we want to protect our ears the best that we can, so that way, we can actually hear what's going on. We'll be able to enjoy things like music, laughing, movies, music, just going on. And of course, the same thing with safety glasses. There's no one correct form of ear protection. So we've got like the little foam pieces that you can kind of smash in between your fingers and then slip it into your ear. We've got the kind that come on sort of like a little neck strap. We've got some that come with a cord, and you can see their shape is different. These are supposed to protect your hearing a little bit better. And we've got the kind that will mold to a direct fit of your ear. Now there's a bunch of different kinds of earplugs, and they all, work to varying degrees. You just want to make sure that you're comfortable while you're working. You can also use these style of earmuffs. They will protect your hearing as well. There is one thing I want to point out though. This gentleman on the right, you see how the strap on his earmuffs is kind of around his neck. That's because they won't fit on top of his head with the safety hat, with the hard hat. And so the same is true for face shields and welding helmets. So they're okay to use if you're not going to be welding in the immediate time. So if you're just working with metal, shaping it, hammering it, cutting it, whatever, feel free to use these. But once you don a welding helmet or a face shield, you're probably going to want to go to one of these smaller types of earplugs. And then let's move on to gloves, because of course, our hands are the money makers. We need to be able to grab hold of material, move it around, and basically weld or cut things. And we're going to be operating equipment using our hands. So we want to protect our hands, because if not, it's going to be really hard to weld or fabricate things with, missing digits, or even, without the use of both of our hands. So when it comes to welding, there are special gloves you need to make sure that you have. And there's all different types of gloves, as you can see here. Many different brands will make welding gloves. You don't have to have the most expensive brand out there. You just have to have a pair that work. There's also gloves for stick welding, MIG welding, TIG welding. It just depends on what process of welding you're going to be dealing with, because if you're wearing stick welding gloves, they're pretty bulky, they're pretty heavy duty. Wearing something like those for TIG welding, you're going to lose a lot of your dexterity. And the same thing if you were to use TIG welding gloves on stick welding, those gloves are going to heat up and burn up pretty fast. So you just want to make sure that the gloves you're wearing actually fit the type of work you're going to be doing. And then there's also basic working gloves. So these gloves will work if you're just handling material, if you're moving metal from one work area to the next, or if you're cutting it, if you're just fitting it together before welding. These are okay to wear, but it's strongly recommended you do not wear these during welding operations. For one, they're just not thick enough, and two, you take the gloves on the left-hand side, there's actually a synthetic layer on the palms. It helps your grip, but that stuff will actually melt when you go to weld, and we really don't want anything melting and sticking to our skin, so we need to avoid that. All right, moving on to welding jackets. So pretty much the same thing with welding gloves. There are various types of welding jackets, just depending on the type of work that you're doing. So this brown jacket right here, and then these black jackets down here, those are pretty thick. Those are your leather jackets. They'll come in either like something like cowhide or pig skin, just whatever is a thick type of material to use for the more heavier duty welding processes. And then you have these welding jackets that almost just appear to be long sleeve shirts, those are for your lighter duty welding processes. So you can even use these with MIG and definitely with TIG. But you just want to make sure that you've got the right welding jacket for the work that you're doing. And then let's talk about protecting our feet. So I always see this in my classes and even in shops that I go and visit. I always see people wearing the wrong types of footwear. So when it comes to protecting our feet, I always say rule of thumb, you just want to have some type of boot on. Some type of boot. Doesn't always have to be steel-toed, just depending on the shop that you're in, especially a school setting, you may not actually need steel-toe boots, but just some sort of boot, okay? So I've got 4 different style boots here. All 4 of them will essentially do the same thing. We're trying to keep our feet from getting burned, and we're trying to prevent stepping on anything that is potentially very hot and will melt through our shoes pretty fast. So if we take a look at these examples, these are just a few examples of footwear that you should not at any time be wearing in a metal shop. So synthetic shoes, anything like sneakers, running shoes, weightlifting shoes, Jordans, anything like that. Certainly no flip-flops and no Crocs. So anything that will melt or just expose the skin of your feet to any kind of heat or hot metal, those are things that we want to avoid. And then if we talk about pants, honestly, rule of thumb, always make sure that your pants are just made out of 100% cotton. They can be denim jeans. They can be, like Dickies cotton work pants, or they can be something along the lines of like Carhartt pants that are made out of like a duck canvas. All 3 of those styles will work, or some variation of those will work. Again, you don't have to spend a lot of money on like a pair of Carhartt pants. You can use a pair of Dickies pants, or just whatever works, whatever fits within your budget. But these styles will definitely not work. So if you're wearing these and you're welding or you're cutting, you're basically a walking fire hazard. So all these frayed pieces or patches, they're all just prone to catching fire. They're all prone to having metal debris and sparks fly and hit your legs and burn your skin. So these are things that we do not want to see either. And like I said before, just in general, you want to make sure that the clothing that you wear is made out of 100% cotton. It doesn't have to be FR rated, and by FR, I mean fire resistant or fire retardant. Those 2 ratings will, of course, give you better protection, but they're also more expensive. So if you're in a job where you can handle that kind of expense, by all means, go for it. But if you're just an entry-level welder, or if you're just a student, just make sure that you've got clothes on that are 100% cotton. You don't want to wear anything that's made out of polyester, rayon, nylon, what else? No silks, no, I can't think of the name right now, but this stuff down here, you often find it with like little throw blankets. I can't remember the name, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. All right, and so let's move on to fire safety. So whenever you're working with welding, cutting, or just hot metal, in any case, you always want to make sure that you have fire extinguishers nearby. Fires are very prone to happen. However, it's just making sure you know what to do in case of a fire. So as we look at these different letters, they are pretty much like a designation for a type of fire extinguisher. So type A fire extinguishers would be great for wood, paper, that sort of thing. B-type fire extinguishers are great for fuels, flammable liquids, so grease, oil, paint, solvents. C, this is the key one right here. We should always have a couple of C-type fire extinguishers in a welding shop. Why? Because they are used for electrical fires. Okay, and then D for combustible metals like magnesium, and then K, well, it says that it's for commercial cooking, but I've always been told that K is kind of like a universal home use. So you can have a variety of these in the shop. Just make sure that you have the right one in the area where you're going to be doing your work. And so more fire safety. Always be aware of where the sparks are flying from your work, whether you're welding, you're gouging, you're cutting, you're grinding, always check to see what is in the area, like what direction are your sparks flying, and just make sure that there are no flammables or combustibles in that area. If there are, move them out of the way. Same thing with weather. So if we're talking about being cautious with fire, we just want to be cautious of the weather. So this person right here is welding in what it looks like wet conditions. Doesn't exactly look like it's currently raining, but you'll always want to be careful from environmental hazards. So always be sure of your surroundings. Make sure you're wearing the right clothing, and make sure that everything is grounded properly. And then let's talk about grinding operations. So it's not just being aware of what in our area our sparks are flying towards, but we also want to make sure that the sparks, if they happen to be flying back at us, we want to make sure that we're properly protected. So a lot of people will make the mistake of believing that if you're wearing a face shield, you don't have to wear safety glasses, and this is not the case. This is not correct. That's kind of like a lazy thing to do. You always want to have the most amount of protection possible. One of my injuries, actually, so this is where I'll tell it. I actually had a piece of metal get stuck in my eye long time ago, and I was wearing safety glasses, and I was wearing a face shield, and it just so happened I took my safety glasses off to like scratch my eye or something like that, and someone next to me was grinding a piece of metal. And sure enough, I felt something hit my eyes, and long story short, it turned out to be a sliver of metal from this thing that someone was grinding on, and it was just an odd kind of chance thing that I just would take my safety glasses off, my face shield was still on, and it just was not a good situation. So if I had left my safety glasses on, walked to a different area where there was no grinding happening, and then scratched my eye, I probably would have been better off. So here are two different types of face shields. Notice how both of them are wearing safety glasses. This is just what we want to do. And so the reason why I'm telling you all this is because at one point in time, it happened to somebody. Someone didn't do the right thing and they got hurt. So take it from experience. Learn from someone's experience. Learn from the content that you're given. Because as this meme states, good judgment comes from experience. Where does that experience come from? It comes from poor judgment.